Discussing world-changing ideas through real conversations, exploring the potential of technology to solve the most critical challenges facing business, people, and the planet. Coming up.
The lab is operative, but still growing. We need to work more to define the test cases and to develop towards blueprints. It's especially about how to automate these processes even further, and also to see different activities. What we have learned that events are also very important, really to bring the community together.
This is the Real Conversations podcast by Nokia. Here is Michael Hainsworth.
Deep in the heart of Berlin beats the I-14Y lab. Its purpose? Bring the wireless community together to accelerate the development of 5G and next-generation wireless hardware and software, because no single vendor, CSP, or SME can go it alone in the age of disaggregation. Cooperation is critical to success. Nobody knows that quite like Katja Henke, the Senior Innovation Project Manager at I-14Y. My first question, what does I-14Y mean?
That is a good question, and I've been asked that quite often. I-14Y stands for Interoperability. And if you have the I and the 14 and you leave out the characters in between, then you will count 14. So I-14Y, interoperability. So it's faster, more efficient, and that's the solution.
Interoperability is critical when we talk about the type of infrastructure that you're working on.
Yeah. Actually, we talk a lot about in the last few years about disaggregation, network disaggregation. And that means, opening up this former black box system, especially in the area, for example, of radio access network. And that is exactly the point. If you open up the black box, then and also invite more players to come up with solutions, you also need to make sure that the interoperability between these different systems is working.
You've written that there was a time when a solo inventor could change the world, but I can imagine disaggregation of the network comes with integration and interoperability challenges. Since 5G is being deployed using multiple vendors within a given CSP, it's all about that interoperability. It's about collaboration. That's crucial for everyone to succeed.
Exactly. As I mentioned, disaggregation is a point where you really open up this black box system. And it is important that the people then here really collaborate to develop these new solutions. It cannot be done by one company anymore because it requires so much skills, and also it is not only time consuming, but also very investment consuming. And especially it is important to bring all these players together. So I think collaboration is key. That is why we think a community approach, an ecosystem is really important to drive that forward. For example, like all this Linux approach and all this, when it comes to openness, it means that more people come together, more players. So that is important.
So who's on board?
We are 3 operators. That means Deutsche Telekom, Telefonica, and Vodafone. And then we have also 3 vendors, 3 small and medium enterprises, and 2 academic institutions. And everything is then funded partially by the German Ministry for Digital and Transport. And if you like, I can go in more detail into the different groups, if you like.
Let's work our way up from that list of the operators, the vendors, the SMEs, and the academic institutions. But you also said that this is because of the German Ministry for Digital and Transport. Let's talk about why they got involved in the first place to bring all the rest of you together.
It is important, not only for Germany, I would say for Europe as well, but here the German Ministry for Digital and Transport has decided to foster and trigger really this ecosystem building. And for this initial start, it needs really to fund different activities. So one was, for example, to set up such an open lab as we run it here in Berlin, but also further protocols will follow, for example, also how to foster SMEs in this field so that they feel attracted to work on network disaggregation in general. So I would say it is in their interest to go really step by step to foster the whole development.
And so the three operators, Deutsche Telekom, Telefonica, Vodafone, what is their role in all of this?
First of all, it is always important that the vendors and all the players who come along to build such an ecosystem work closely together. So they need to understand what is the operator's requirements. And here with the Open Lab, we provide a touch point with three of these operators so that they better understand our way of working and our requirements. And we want to give access to reference implementations, which we have agreed among us. And our ultimate goal is also to avoid fragmentation, where is always a risk when you have different ecosystems in place. And this is, as we agree on these test scenarios, that there is more certainty for the vendors where is really our pain point.
And as far as those vendors are concerned, I know you've got Rohde & Schwarz, Capgemini Engineering, and Nokia. What is their role in all of this?
They contribute to develop reference implementations. Or, for example, they also provide test equipment. But as I said, this is a consortium, so that means that they build some parts of it, but we also collaborate with further other vendors to complement the environment. But they bring also their experience, not only in form of equipment, or also in form of skill sets and expertise to the play.
That expertise is sort of folded into the academic institutions like TU Berlin and Fraunhofer, but also I think the SMEs, this is sort of the critical point of this. I see the Open Radio Access Network as the linchpin here. If small companies can't afford to build out their contributions to ORAN, this is where they can go. They can test their technology capabilities to work with larger vendors.
I would not only stress the smaller companies. I think such a test environment is important also for the bigger vendors because they have an interest to get certified, to get the badges. But of course, it makes sense, especially for the smaller ones who cannot afford to set up such an infrastructure or to get access to such an infrastructure. They, of course, have a specific interest, but really to make clear, it is important to the broader ecosystem here as well, also to the bigger players. And especially as it is also to reduce the transaction cost for everyone, especially as it is our intention to share results so that everyone can benefit from that.
And I guess that's why you've got Plugfest. We should probably explain what Plugfest is.
Yeah. A Plugfest is, of course, not a party type or anything like that. It is more where different vendors come together, and it could be hardware and software. And before they start the Plugfest, they agree on a test plan and what should be tested. And then they come to a certain time frame together. Let's say, as we have currently a Plugfest running for 2 weeks. And they test their equipment against each other or their software. And it can happen on-site, but it could be also remotely done. So they really come together to test and furthermore to get more inputs for developing further blueprints and standards. So to accelerate market readiness in the future.
Well, tell me about how you're building this open lab in Berlin to help build that future of telco networks. You're testing and validating components for their interoperability and integration?
Yeah, not only for the interoperability and integration, I would also say for the conformance in general. So it is very much also that we provide access here also for permanent testing, because it's not only, once a year to run a Plugfest, it is really a continuous development. So we need to run also this permanent test and certification processes and to really set here a broader frame for standardized testing in general based on shared scenarios. And this is really to build the open ecosystem further.
Since you're in the early stages of setting up this lab, how will the partners collaborate beyond things such as PlugFest?
I would say there are different possibilities. First of all, there are those companies who have an interest to test or validate, be it their hardware, their software, so they can come along to run the test, to specify their test, to get certified and or batch together with the ORAN Alliance specifications and the TIP. But also, especially as we have been at the Fuse, and many companies also reached out to us with the interest to become an associated partner of the Open Lab. And here we are in general open, but of course we need to go step by step to either onboard them. But you see, it is really, we are at the beginning and we need to grow step by step.
After this podcast, learn more about this and other insightful topics by going to nokia.com/thought-leadership. There you'll find additional information linked to today's podcast. Tell me about those steps. What's the next step for you?
The lab is operative, but still growing. We need to work more to define the test cases and to develop towards blueprints. We also think about, or not only think about, we want to start with this permanent testing beginning of next year. So it is really to go step by step and at the same time also improving our processes. It's especially about how to automate these processes even further and also to see different activities. What we have learned that events are also very important, really to bring the community together. So it's not only a PlugFest, which might take place once a year. It could be also smaller meetups or also to organize exchanges among the different players. I think that is important and we will work on that as well. What we have also identified is that upskilling is a very important activity. And here we will also start thinking about how to do that, how to foster that in collaboration with other partners.
Tell me more about that upskilling component, because there is an understanding that we are entering a whole new way of approaching wireless networks with 5G and then 6G and everything beyond that. What's the current state of the education within the industry that needs those skills to be leveled up?
Okay, that would be really hard to go into all the details, but I think what is observable, that, of course, radio access network developments, disaggregation, open radio networks requires new resources. And what we see within telcos or also other companies, it is not existing to full extent. So people have to learn, as it is always the case when you come up with the new approaches. But it is really required to do that and also to provide here a possibility. Not only for us here at the lab, but also to do that for others.
Well, let's expand upon that, because as you mentioned, there are 2 academic institutions that are on board as well. Tell me about who they are and what role they'll provide to the lab.
Yeah, so on the one hand side, there is from Fraunhofer Institute, the Heinrich Hertz Institute. And on the other side, also the Technical University. Here they are in charge of working on security testing, and security is, of course, one important topic when it comes also to disaggregation. And the other part is how to develop an emulation environment for testing. Also, for example, digital twin approaches. So it goes in this direction. And it's really how to prepare the pipeline for further developments in the lab.
Tell me about those 3 SMEs.
Yeah, we are very happy to have them on board. All 3 of them are actually based in Berlin, so just around the corner of the I-40Y lab. And here we have ENTC, for example. They have been around in the market for testing for 20 years, so they bring a lot of expertise in the field of testing, and then also the BISDN. They are very much in the automation of lab, how to do that. And then we have high-speed technologies, so they come from the open source software development for SMO. And that is really good to have these smaller companies that have been in the market for a long time, and to complement here the requirements and the knowledge of operators, especially to set the lab up.
This all feels very much like a startup. Let's talk about those deliverables. You've got a 3-year mandate, and I can imagine you'd like to keep going after the 3 years of funding?
Definitely. I mean, that would be our goal. And the first year has almost passed, and 2 years to follow. But what we have understood, it is important to already start thinking about right now how to continue. That is our goal, to think about how to provide these services, these offerings also after the funding. And that is why we have set up a stream thinking about the future model, whom to involve, how to do that, and that is very much also the startup effect. So I cannot say how it will look like, but definitely it is really an endeavor, and especially with all these consortium partners on board, it will keep us busy.
Building a future that's productive, sustainable, and inclusive in a world that acts together. Discover how by visiting nokia.com/thought-leadership.